Well, good morning, everybody. I thought I'd start you off with something kind of interesting this morning here. I've got a video I want to show you as you kind of keep an eye on that animation in the background. Now, what that animation is in the background is looking over the last 7 days as to where across the United States our weather stations either approached or set or tied some sort of record for temperature. Could be daily, could be monthly, but you can see the brutally cold air that we were dealing with about a week ago coming through the central United States. At the very end of this, of course, you're going to start to see some red dots show up as we move into a very mild time period here to finish the month of February. But I made a statement in a video I did, I don't know, maybe a week ago about supercooled water and how you could get water to remain a liquid down to temperatures as cold as -40 if it was pure water. So it was kind of fun. When I got back to O'Hare, what was that, last Wednesday or Thursday, I just recorded a video in my car and I want to show it to you. So it's this one right over here. So take a look at this one. Hopefully be able to hear it. All right, just got back to my car and I have one bottle that is not frozen in the back, but it's 14 degrees outside in the parking garage here at O'Hare. So I'm just going to try this simple tip, and there it goes. That's pretty neat, isn't it? Right? What happened is that water had a temperature well below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, but it had not yet froze. And the reason is that water, in order to begin to build its crystalline structure, which is what we call ice, has to have something to build on. It needs an impurity, or it needs something along the edge of that plastic bottle where it can affix a water molecule such that it leaves its two hydrogen molecules sticking out and they don't move, right? Or they move very little. And that's how you can start to build a crystal. It's called a nucleation event. In this particular case, it wasn't until I tipped it upside down and either disturbed the water and just randomly got one of those hydrogen bonds to stay permanent, or it was maybe the roughness of the cap compared to the smoothness of the sides of the bottle. Either way, it started the rapid conversion of this from liquid to a solid, and it was pretty neat to see that. Now it turns into a slush. It doesn't turn into rock hard ice, because the whole process gives up energy, so it actually keeps the system a little bit warmer. Kind of think of it as like an exothermic process, if you will. But I just wanted to show you that because I got some questions on it before. Okay, back to the weather, though. We did see a pretty wild change overall in our temperatures, though, as we get through the 19th and 20th here. We got rid of this north-south flow and started to flood much of the United States with much more mild air. That was at times coming out of the west and even pulling up out of the Gulf. So at the very end, see this yesterday, some of these red dots that were showing up here. Just early this morning here on Monday, we can see many locations throughout the United States 10, 15, 20 degrees warmer than they were just yesterday. And even for many of us in the Midwest, yesterday was a bit more of a mild day. As we look at it here, just here before 6 a.m. as to where, though, we have some adverse weather, this map is going to kind of get me informed on what I want to talk about in the near term. We do have a deep low that's just living off the coast. Very strong winds again today coming into parts of Montana. Winter storm warnings, flood watches. This is a pretty active go of it for the Northwest. But we're waiting to see if anything is going to really shift around in the Pacific Ocean, specifically with the jet stream as we move toward meteorological spring, which we start on March 1st. Now, astronomical spring doesn't happen until the equinox, and that's, of course, later in March. But if we start to see a spring-like pattern emerging, some of my biggest concerns, which are what's fall's drought still look like in our soil? What did winter do? And I think we just better spend a moment kind of talking about that. So just taking a quick look at the wind study, there's a very deep low that is off the Pacific Northwest coast. I'll show you where that one goes in a few moments. Still very strong winds coming through parts of Montana and Wyoming. Downslope winds that are coming in this area, but could be very, very gusty again. We'll take a look at those wind speeds in a few moments. But what I'm curious about as we go forward in this pattern toward the month of March is, will the atmosphere return some sort of ridging event over like the Bahamas or Cuba, somewhere in the Caribbean, such that we can dip more troughs into the west and get the pattern to come across like this. So I don't know how much you pay attention to the storm chasing community. Personally, I used to chase storms all the time. That was before I had kids and a different job, and I had freedom to chase storms. But one of the things that we often look for is the pattern to have that southwest component to the flow. And the reason we look for this is because of the way it sets up some sort of ridging in one of these three spots to keep the Gulf open, keep the instability high, and get the systems to roll out of the mountains and just race across the country. A lot of the storm chasers that recently have been giving us their seasonal outlooks, they're keeping a close eye on the southeast, what we call Dixie Alley, or parts of maybe the Mid-South to the Ohio Valley versus the plains as being the epicenter for most of the severe weather. And unfortunately, many are tossing out the year 2011 as an analog, and I can't ignore that as an analog, and I'm going to make a case for that for you as I walk through the rest of these slides today. Next, just understand, though, that in the near term, with the huge system that's leaving the west and the stronger flow that's just generally coming across the country from the west to the east, we do expect over this next week numerous locations to be experiencing some very strong winds. So we know that today, of course, this is in Montana, but take a look once that system comes on in parts of Oregon, Washington, 50-mile-an-hour gusts. We can see all across the northern interior of the U.S. and Ontario and Quebec, very strong winds. If there's a place where it's a bit calmer, it's in the Cotton Belt down here in the south and east. So let's have a look real quick, just going back as to where we've been on precip. So I kind of want to give you that wind narrative real quick and then come back to some of these ideas. Over the weekend, where did we see most of our heaviest rainfall? It was down here in Louisiana, southern Mississippi, parts of Texas, and then it was in the Northwest. And those were the only two real corridors that had any sort of a disturbance in the atmosphere to make precipitation. The rest of the country was changing in its temperature pattern, going back over mild, but we're still quite dry. Speaking of dry, I just want to show you a few maps here to consider what needs to be really disrupted as we get into this month of March and then eventually into the rest of spring. Since the beginning of the new year, there's kind of been two strong epicenters of very, very dry conditions compared to the historical averages. It's this western and central Corn Belt region here and then the southwest. We've been incredibly wet through this area. In fact, we talked last week about the flooding that happened in Kentucky, followed by the freezing temperatures and snow. Same thing, Virginia, parts of West Virginia. South of there, it's been a bit drier. Northeast, we've not had systems kind of curl up the coast. They've just exited very quickly. That's been largely due to the deep low that's been living off of the northeast coast. And we noticed that this has been a preferred corridor of extremely wet conditions throughout this winter. Thankfully, right now, we're bringing more into coastal Washington and Oregon, which is a drier spot. But you got to keep looking at these ranks maps because they tell you, they tell you the extremes, I think, very, very clearly. And it helps us understand what spring must do in order to, get us toward a path of least resistance, at least with getting a crop established. The newest drought monitor, here, shows a large percentage of the United States in some form of drought. And as you kind of take a look at this, it lines up well with the map I just showed you a moment ago. But if I come over here to data and go to time series, right now at the very tail end of this, we've got about, let's see here, one more step. There we go. We've got about 71% of the country in some form of drought, D0 to D4, and about 45% of the country in D1 to D4. If you want to see individual crops, you can come up here to Ag and Drought. It'll open up a new browser window. I click on row crops just because I want to see the list of them very quickly here. And so, for example, corn production, 45%. Durum wheat, 61%. You can kind of look at each crop that you're interested in and see where those, where those area kind of percentages line up. I also want to show you this from the drought monitor. This is the 12-week class change, so I'm trying to look to see where winter caused some issues. We've talked extensively about the Southwest, but after November, this particular part of our cotton belt here has gone relatively dry. We've had really no change, even some degradation throughout much of the Midwest. Remember, you're only going to see places on this where there was drought that could improve or where it's gotten worse. So we notice that a lot of the Ohio River Valley, for example, is not being shown on this map. And speaking of that Ohio River Valley, I just want to give you the latest after the Ohio River comes into the Mississippi at Memphis. Just in the last 3 weeks, the river has come up over 30 feet, and it is now at action stage if you look right over here at Memphis. Now, all you need to do is drive up that river a short ways to St. Louis, and you see that the Mississippi, after the Missouri River comes into it in St. Louis, is right now this morning 3.03 feet below low stage. And again, what this is reflecting is, again, the narrative I've got about what spring must do. We've been extremely wet in through here, also down in the lower Mississippi Valley. we had snow last weekend, or last week right here that hit parts of Colorado, which is great. And then big time moisture that's been coming through this pocket of the Northwest. And now, thankfully, more that's coming into Washington and coastal Oregon. But there's this long stretch through the midsection of the country where fall's drought has been compounded by a dry winter and inadequate snowfall for this region compared to historical averages. And that is just one of the reasons why we have concern about this upcoming growing season if spring rains don't come through and correct that. So let's get into the meteorology of this. I hope you like this part of my discussion today. Going back to December 1 and looking up until this past weekend, the color shading in this map represents zonal wind. Now, zonal wind is defined as blowing from the west to the east. So a positive zonal wind goes from west to east. So if you see negative values, this would not indicate a wind coming out of the east, but it would indicate here a slower than average zonal wind. So what we've seen is this. This has been our main player. Most of winter, the jet is extended to about here. Only occasionally, 3 times, has it extended into Northern California, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana. And what we've had lows that have curled up here, highs that have curled up to the south there. And the problem has been the extension of this jet has not been able to really make it for extended periods of times past Hawaii. What's happened then off the East Coast is that our westerly winds have been increasing here, which means systems have raced off the coast rather than curled to the north. And what this has done is this has really just got us curious. Is this the kind of pattern we persist with as we move towards spring, or does spring shake it all up? And the biggest piece I'm waiting for is this. That would be where our subtropical jet would come from, and it has been non-existent this winter. In fact, you can see it a little bit easier on this graphic. Now, I haven't shown this to you in a while, but this is the total atmospheric angular momentum. And in a nutshell, wherever your latitude is, if you can keep the momentum high, like it's been in the Pacific Ocean, in the Pacific Ocean from Japan out to Hawaii, the systems are going to crank. But this has been our biggest problem. Leaving the subtropics, we've not had any sort of strong flow, and that's what's kept global momentum for a while low. Now listen carefully to me. When we get into summer, this particular time series of momentum will be absolutely critical to understanding if the atmosphere is going to ridge up and stay ridged up, creating drought and dryness for places. And I'm going to continue to show this to you as we go forward. But right now, in the near term, I'm looking for any fluctuations as we move towards spring. And if I take you over to Victor Cassini's page, this is at Northern Illinois University, there's one thing I'm noticing. Now, if you look, this is latitude. So there's the equator. These are the southerly latitudes. These are the northerly ones, okay? And what you've got graphed out for you here is this is an Earth relative angular momentum. In other words, it's just telling me how does the atmosphere of motion compare to the Earth's rotation? So it's relative to Earth spinning. And what you want to know is if this red line, which is denoted as today, where it sits compared to the average. And what I'm seeing here is that in the northern hemisphere, especially today, we've got some stronger, there's just higher momentum in the atmosphere. And it looks just like this. That's it. That's that westerly momentum we're talking about. Now, the question is, when are we going to get the effect of this across the United States? Because normally, whenever we see big jet extensions this time of year that get all the way to the coast, we just flood the United States with a lot of mild air. We saw this all last winter. And right now, you can still see a net westerly component to the atmosphere across the United States, which is why we're no longer dealing with straight flow out of the north, which has been brutally cold for a while, and the temperatures have started to warm up. But I want to know this. What does this look like about a month from now? And we're trying to get that answer teased out of the flow because for the next week or so, from now till next Sunday, okay, through Sunday night, we're not yet getting the benefit of that flow because what's going on right now is that it's coming and splitting still. So there's still some kind of flow bringing clippers out of Canada, which is why we have this corridor showing up wet. We see that pockets of this moisture are hitting the Pacific Northwest, mostly in the next 24 to 36 hours with that deep low lingering off the coast. But for a while here, there's just a broad sector of the country that is not going to be able to pick up much moisture at all. And we're waiting to see how that evolves as we get into week 2. So if we just look at this compared to historical averages, this is the European model's 7-day forecast looking at precipitation anomalies. So these colors, of course, are wetter than average and these are drier. Now, there's no one in this region, I think, that's complaining about this. But there's a lot of us in the central United States, in the plains, coming over into California, the desert Southwest, that need to get this moisture. Same thing with the Northeast. So what happens is that the hope is that this piece of the jet stream has more of an influence into week 2. And the European ensemble is showing that. And what's interesting about this is there is some interesting timing in a weather system on the 3rd and 4th that could come right out of Colorado. And as it does so, many of us in ag are going to be in Denver for the Commodity Classic. And I cannot rule out the chances for some snow. But just take a look at what happens when that flow gets across the country. We start to see this increased chance, March 4 to March 10, of moisture kind of getting back into the system. Now, this will continue to be a concern, all of this region. And you can tell that this system likely does not have what it takes to draw back that moisture, get that negative tilt in the jet stream flow to just yank a system all the way up to the Red River Valley of the North. But currently lurking off the coast is just the beginning of this. Watch this water vapor animation. Here's our first deep low. Watch it coming out right here. There it is, coming straight into the Pacific Northwest right now. So we are seeing that this flow, watch this as I step down in the atmosphere, is trying to curl up several lows. See them? So the strongest flow aloft is here. Underneath them, just to the north, we've got lows stacked up across the North Pacific. So that first one's coming in, and I just want to start this off. Let's back this up a little bit. Right, here we go. As we watch this going forward, we have a low that's leaving the Hudson Bay. We have storms that are over Florida this morning. And we're going to see this low just lash its way into the Pacific Northwest as we work our way through tomorrow morning. Look at that. Just watch it again. Deep low that's coming through there. There's some light rain while this happens on Tuesday morning that spreads over parts of Ohio as a little front sags to the south of that longer and broader low that's now moving off into off through Quebec. But then we don't see a whole lot happening through the rest of Tuesday into Wednesday. There's just another little clipper right here that kind of snuck over the top. It's going to drag a front through this area, but not a whole lot of precipitation out of that one on the whole. To see where things go from here, I need to broaden out and look at the GFS versus the European. Just to let you know, the European's got a slightly higher skill score right now than the GFS. But let's kind of pick this up through the rest of the day on Monday into Tuesday and now Wednesday. So as we play forward, there's that little clipper sneaking through with its front. Good timing on both models. This is Wednesday evening. We then see the next system going into British Columbia as this one tries to deepen a bit over Ontario and Quebec. You can see that it will drag a front over the Appalachian Mountains, a little more pronounced in the GFS than it is in the European. And that system tries to curl off east with some lake effect behind it. All right, our next clipper comes out of Saskatchewan into southern Manitoba. Same timing in the models. When is it? Friday. And that just goes right over the Great Lakes into the northeast. Now we're Saturday, March 1st, getting into Sunday, March 2nd. And this is when we get our first halfway decent wave coming into the west. And as it does, so it's moisture for Oregon, California, and then it's going to come over the Rocky Mountains. And this is where things might shape up by Monday. Now, the models are different timing. The European, interestingly enough, is more progressive with the system. The GFS is slower. For most of my professional career, I would have said the opposite, that the GFS was the faster of the two models, not the European. But as you can see, this is Monday, March 3rd, getting out there to early morning Tuesday, March 4th. The European model is attempting to put down more snow throughout the Colorado Rockies. That is what could be interesting for Commodity Classic as folks are trying to leave. And then we're going to watch this system really open up into the midsection of the country. So this is a true Colorado low coming through like this, which means we will be discussing the threat of severe weather. At some point early next week, there'll be a band of snow likely on the northern side of this. Now, the GFS is later, but it's got a system farther to the north. There'll still be stronger storms to the south, but you can see the snow risk on the northern side of this. So that, even though the models are a little bit off on the timing, to know that they both have some system Sunday through Wednesday getting across the country is something we need to pay attention to here. When we look at who doesn't get the moisture out of this, this is a 15-day map looking at who stays under a half inch. So that corridor continues to stay drier, and so does this corridor. But we're waiting to see how we might be able to fill in the middle here with this system coming out early next week. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday is really the time frame. On the wetter side of this, who's got the highest probability of getting over an inch? We now start to see that the whole eastern part of the country, and then the coastal regions in the west and the high altitude regions in Idaho and Montana seem to pick up the best moisture there. On the snow side of things, I want to start with the probabilities, because through next weekend, there's your Clipper track, okay? You can see some more snow coming into the northern Rockies and the Cascades. But as you get out there, this is now into Sunday, Monday, and early Tuesday. I'm looking specifically at Denver because I'm going to be there. And we start to see these chances for snow beginning to increase. So we've got to pay attention to this system early next week and what it might mean in that particular region. Let's just take this out to 10 days and stretch it up to 3 inches, though, just kind of looking for biggest snowfall in this particular setup. And for late February through early March, to see a hole like this tells you that this pattern still has some unresolved problems with getting lows to curl up on negative tilt. We're just not seeing that a whole lot. In terms of total snowfall through the next 7 days, here's the European model, and there is the GFS. Now remember, this does not include the snow that's coming into Colorado. I will show you that. Let's just step this out to 40. That should take us out to 10. Oh, I'm so sorry, not 240. 40, there we go. That is the, oh, Eric, what are you doing wrong? Oh, I forgot the period. There we go. There's the 10-day. And here is the 10-day European, which is the more aggressive on the snow in that area. So at least wanted to show you what these maps look like. Okay, bigger picture. That's the low I'm concerned about coming through California, Nevada, Arizona, and the Four Corners states Monday into Tuesday. Now, all this business I keep talking about with tilt, this one's straight up and down with a little positive tilt to it. If I were to draw those lines and it looks something like this, then we'd be talking about an epic snowstorm for Colorado. It's just not there. But you've got to have a much bigger southeast ridge to make that happen. So into early March, we're just looking at possibly a pattern that favors western U.S. troughs, and that could really begin to set things up much more active for the rest of March, which is traditionally one of our most active months for weather in the year. Okay, so from here, I don't want to talk yet about temperatures there. I want to get you to this map. Oh, I know what I was doing here. I'm so sorry. Let me shrink that back up. There you go. This is what we're looking at for day 8 through 14. So sorry, I wanted to give you that week 2 precip first. Notice that in all 4 of our major, forecast maps here, they're all capturing this event coming through midweek next week. See it? So it is showing much more activity at that point. Now let's talk temperatures. So here is today's forecast highs. We might crack 60 in Sioux Falls. Crazy to think about that. Then you get here to Tuesday, very mild in parts of Nebraska. We're going to melt any snow that's on the ground in this area. That would be Tuesday, getting into Wednesday, still very mild across much of the country. From there to Thursday, we could have warmer temperatures in South Dakota than we do have for parts of Texas. Then we get into Friday, still another warm push here. And this is going to feel like full-on spring. By the end of the week, Sunday, March 2nd, we're going to be watching one system coming to California, one leaving through the Hudson Bay. This is the Clipper that comes through here and kind of curls up a little farther to the north. But overall, if we come back to that temperature map I had, there we go. Look at our matrix. I don't see any major cold intrusions from any of the models for the next 15 days. Just kind of blur your eyes. It's day 5, 0 through 5, 5 through 10, 10 through 15. But I am not settled on this pattern not delivering another punch of cold air in late March. And my reasoning behind that has been the MJO. The extended forecast of the MJO last month did this same thing where it forecasted to dive into null space, and instead it popped out way over here and made a track all the way around. So what I'm telling you is that the MJO has had more ability to be more active and sweep its way through. And if that does, that would point us toward a late March, early April kind of pattern shift. And that would drop in another probably significant round of some colder air. I don't know how significant, because late March cold is way different than late February cold. But there is still the possibility that this pattern is on about a 5-week cycle as it moves through. One other thing to think about here is what our ocean temperatures are doing. We've noticed that in the last week or so, very mild water has kind of resurfaced here, so it's warmed up considerably. kind of throwing the brakes on our La Nina, slowing it down quite a bit. But as we just think about the impacts of this, I will give you the forecast right now from the CPC through the front half of March. So this is all the way up to the equinox. Very mild conditions. It's after this that we're concerned about the drop in temperatures. But there you go. That's your latest from the CPC. European model on precip continues to look exactly the way it's looked for March for about, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And it's this region that shows up drier, very active rolling through here. Now, I've mentioned earlier my risk in spring is kind of following a lot of the storm chasers are considering, which would kind of give us these two epicenters, if you will, of greater risk on severe weather. That does not mean we won't get it here. It just means watch the Ohio Valley, watch the Mid-South, watch the Southeast. Now, if this is wrong, and we have a lot of our major thunderstorm activity, the big ones, the big supercell outbreaks, and the storm chasers aren't in Alabama, but they're in Oklahoma or Kansas or Texas, that is a huge signal toward the positive on not having drought risk develop in spring in the plains. But if you wake up every day and Reed Timmer is somewhere down here in the Southeast, or any of the storm chasers, or Jim Cantori's hanging out in Birmingham, then that is the signal that the pattern is not capable of delivering moisture farther back to the east, or to the west, from the east, and that's what got me worried about this region. Now, I got a whole bunch of slides stacked up here before we finish this out, and that's going to show you the newest updates from the government. So this is the NOAA. So this is their March, April, May outlook, and we're looking at precipitation anomalies here. This is another month forward. This is April, May, June. So they are pinning a lot of the dryness here, very wet conditions here, trying to probably have very tight windows to get a crop in. This is then May, June, July. This is June, July, August. Now there's a major difference in their forecast, putting the driest conditions into Montana, and where the European and the National Multi-Model Ensemble are putting it, which is more toward the western Corn Belt, northern plains, high plains from Colorado all the way to Missouri. That, where I just shaded in, is where the European is placing the heat and dryness. Also where the NMME is. Our NOAA forecast is much farther to the north and west. And I'm curious if, because of the way they're forecasting these temperatures, this is March, April, May, into April, May, June, in May, June, July. Look at this. And then June, July, August. They're kind of following what we'd really just call about a 25-year trend to have much more ridging across the west coast than anywhere, giving us northwest flowing through here, placing the greatest drought in the Great Basin all the way up to Montana, storms into this area. And I just wonder if this is too much based on kind of historical guidance. What I mean by that is longer term trends than maybe what this particular year might throw at us. That's not a criticism of NOAA, not even close. I love these guys. They're amazing. It's just a difference of opinion, and that's all. But I need you to see it because we're going to continue to talk about it for the rest of this month. So stuff that away in the back of your head. Finally, just 3 more slides to go. I want to give you the latest that's going on in South America. Let's go ahead and play this. This is the weekend rainfall. And if we can get that to play less choppy, I guess. We do notice that there were some big storms that hit, there they are, right down there into parts of Cordoba over toward Buenos Aires through early this morning. Not so sure why this is so choppy and playing, but I want to show you that over the last month, we've watched much drier conditions build in here and the dryness that was in Argentina shrink. Now you can be a little drier than normal through here and it'd be no problem at all. And as we look at it over the next 7 days, well, this is capturing the big storms that went through early this morning and late last night. But if you come out here to day 8 through 14, look at that. If you'd have looked at this on Friday, this was all showing up wetter in the models. And now the new 14-day forecast looks like this. Now listen to me as I finish this up. The top story for me in the Safrinha crop is whether or not we can get the big subtropical high, which lives here, to move toward these Brazilian states. Bahia, Minas Gerais, maybe Goiás, Tocantins. 50% of the Safrinha corn is grown in Mato Grosso, though. But there is a risk that we see this high pressure build into this area, slowing the monsoon down and shoving it farther and farther to the west. And we've now seen a couple of model runs this weekend give us this solution. watch it carefully with me, all right? Please watch it carefully with me. I'll bring you updates every day as we walk through this. Okay, have a good rest of your day. We'll talk tomorrow. Thanks.